Hello, I'm Carol.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome to the Grief Gurus, a space for honest conversations around grief, coping, and living with loss.
We believe that grief is part of your story, but it's not the whole part of your story. Today, we are going to examine the question, is the second year worst? Now, I know a lot of people say that. Lisa, what was your experience with that?
Oh gosh. Um,
Yeah.
I honestly, for me, the second year was probably not that different than the first year in terms of, I think I was still pretty dumbstruck when my daughter, died. I'd made a decision pretty early on within the first maybe 3 or 4 months after her death to become a nurse. So I had, gotten really involved in searching for schools and programs and getting all that done. But it was all a bit of a blur. And maybe it's because it was my daughter and my only child at that time. And
Yeah.
but for me, I don't know that I can delineate that, but I know that people talk about this. And so I'm curious, what your experience
Mhm.
was around the first
Yeah.
year versus the second year.
Well, I have to say, it really bothered me when I started reading this in Facebook groups and people saying that. And I thought, how can it be any worse than this?
Right.
And And actually, I don't think it's helpful because it isn't necessarily worse. And I'm with you as well. I'm not sure I could delineate either, year one was really bad, year two was less bad, year three, as I think I've mentioned before, it probably took me 4 years to come back to some sort of
Yeah.
normalcy. It took me a lot longer than I thought. But I would definitely say the second year was not obviously worse. And I think this can
Hmm.
be really challenging for people because if you are in that first year where you're going through all those firsts, the first anniversary of their death, the birthday, the Christmas, whatever it is, and then somebody says, well, the second year's worse. How on earth? Your heart sinks. It's like, I don't know that I
It's
can
not
manage.
helpful.
And I think what it often is that you have got through all these firsts. And in the second year, now the reality is setting in, isn't it? They're really not coming back. It's really quiet. Perhaps it's that we feel the absence more, that we're not just trying to put one step, foot in front of the other, just trying to get through. Now we're sort of starting to live life, and it's like, wow, they aren't here. So perhaps that's what people mean when they say the second year's worse. What do you think?
I think you've hit it on the, hit it because it is this kind of this feeling of the enormity of the loss.
Yeah.
And certainly, as you're going through that first year, you are distracted in a sense with the way that it's coming up for me right now is it's almost like the difference between, you're walking and it's the difference between looking at your feet and looking ahead. And when you're in
Mm-hmm.
that first year, and certainly this was my experience of being, how am I going to survive my birthday? How am I going to survive Mother's Day? How am I going to survive her birthday? And also this ongoing reckoning with, on this day last year, I was doing XYZ. On this day last year is when she got the diagnosis. On this day last year is when we decided to, talk with the ethics committee or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
there's this very micro awareness of dates and times. At least that was true for me. And then as you move away from that, there's no more novelty to it. Like you've
Yeah.
already hit on all of these firsts. And then as you sort of bring your head up and look ahead, it's like, oh my God, this isn't a short-term thing. This
It's still
this
here.
person is gone. And like I think that maybe that, like you said, I think that might be why people will say, oh, the second year, is a lot worse. What I would invite folks to do is try not to get hung up on any of that because that can be very discouraging to hear
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah.
just trying, when you're still in that first year
Yeah.
and you really are just trying to get through
And I
getting,
want
yeah.
Yeah, and I think, there's that societal judgment as well of, well, you've done 1 year, so you must be feeling better now. And then that can make you feel worse because it's like, actually, I'm not really feeling better. I'm not doing well. And yet everybody's expecting me to be back to normal. And so I would think that can put pressure on people to feel worse in the second year. Perhaps in the first year, everybody's more compassionate, they're understanding, it's year one. But the misunderstanding in grief is that then it's done and that we move on. And so I think that just adds pressure to somebody who's grieving, who may then think, wow, everybody who was compassionate, all that understanding has fallen away. And I'm even more alone now in this second year. And I think that falling away, perhaps, of support can make it feel more difficult.
Right, like you no longer qualify for, someone giving you grace, or, you
Yeah,
no longer qualify for, like, hey, I know I said I was coming, but I'm not coming anymore. Well, I'm here to tell you, you qualify always to do
yep,
the thing that you need to do to take care of yourself. But I also think that, yeah, it's kind of realizing, wow, this is still happening. And it reminds me of one of our earlier chats around time, the
yep,
function of time, how it can help us heal. But the way that we're spending our time will impact what that means. So if for the first year we weren't able to actively grieve at all and we were dumbstruck, as I believe that I was dumbstruck,
yep,
if we haven't been able to do anything to process and to help ourselves along a healing path, whether it's therapy, whether it's better nutrition and sleep and some of the fundamental things, and coming to terms, if we have not been able to do those things, it might get a little bit harder as we go. But that doesn't mean it's wrong for us. It's always the right thing if we're doing it, because it's our journey and it's our path. But if we have not been able to do some of those, pull some of those kind of powerful healing levers in the first year, the second year, it might feel harder. But it doesn't
yeah,
mean that you've done it wrong.
yeah,
On the flip side, if the loss is something that you were able to start integrating, earlier on in that first year, then, there might not be a difference between the second
yeah.
year. You
And I,
mentioned you felt like you, sorry, go ahead.
no, go, you go.
Well, you were mentioning, that you felt like you were grieving for about 4 years,
Yeah,
acutely.
yeah,
I don't really know when that changed over for me. It's an interesting question, but I
yeah,
do know that for year one, year two, year three, it all blurs for me. So I don't have, this idea that the second year is harder. That's not something that crossed my radar at all during that time. It's something I hear now that I'm, having
yeah.
these conversations and talking with clients and facilitating the community.
Mm-hmm,
It's
hmm.
kind of a buzz. I don't know if it's a buzz phrase that's a little bit more popular now, but
I
when I
think
look at my own experience,
it, it's
I
a
didn't notice a
misconception.
difference.
The misconception, along with all the other ones, that people say things because they don't know what to say. Remember, and I mean, some grievers will find it, but don't say it to somebody else who's grieving. They
Yeah,
don't need
don't
to
say
hear
it.
that. Don't say, just don't say it. Keep it to yourself. If your second year was harder, keep it to yourself because that was your journey.
Mhm.
All our journeys are different for so many different reasons, and we don't want to compare. Comparison doesn't help us. Lisa and I don't compare our griefs and say, well, Lisa's lost two children. It must be worse than Carol's losing her husband. Each grief is valid, and your loss is the most important loss to you. Thank you, David Kessler, for saying that. And a reminder that he also said acute grief is up to 2 years. So you may well feel really bad in that second year. Does it matter if it's worse or better than the first? Not really. It's a journey. What matters is what support you have, how you're dealing with it, what self care practices you're doing, how you're acknowledging your grief, how you're working with it to integrate it into life so that you can step back into a life that is meaningful. I think that's what is more important than really thinking, oh my gosh, the second year is coming up and I know it's going to be awful. Because we know when we put that out there, guess what tends to happen? It tends to
Reaction
be awful,
formation.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, for
So let's
sure.
not put an intention out there that yes, or an acceptance that the second year is always bad. It isn't.
Yeah, we're definitely
It
not
may be.
running for a finish
Gone.
line.
No,
We're
we're
not
not.
reaching to get to some particular place.
Yeah, it may be equally as bad as the first year. It may be worse. It may be better. So let's not just ignore it when somebody says that and say,
Yes.
oh, well, that was your experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing. It's really
Yeah.
not helpful for me right
And
now. And I think that when I think about what we're talking about, this kind of second year blues kind of a thing,
yeah,
for me, I think the idea or the concept is more like it's not until we navigate time in general that we know what the loss really is.
yeah,
And what I mean by that, like for me and with my daughter dying and my son who died, the day that he was born in 2002, excruciating, in the beginning, it is such a shell shock, but it's not until I'm now in, my mid 50s where I'm seeing how my like aged, peers and my other friends are relating to their adult children, what that looks like when they're graduating college or when they get a job or when they have a child and things like that, that it's like, wow, I knew I lost my babies. I didn't know that I also lost all these
totally.
other things. And if
Yeah,
you have been grieving really hard in the first year and then you sort of come up for air as that wears off, it might feel like that second year is hard. But I would just offer that I think, depending on the profound nature of the loss and how close to you that person was that died, it may be that you continue to discover ways that you miss them and are reminded of them and are triggered, by grief. But that is normal and it's
yeah,
natural, and the time frame doesn't matter. It's just something that, we carry with us, as we always say, and we're in it together. And it's not that we are grieving all the time, but when those things come up, they're worthy of our attention, they're worthy of our care, and they won't last forever. We then move into something else. And I don't think putting a time label on things is helpful
yeah.
at all.
So I think
So
the answer is the second year worse? Not necessarily, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we don't want to label it that way and set ourselves up. So,
yeah.
but if we say, well, the second year gets easier, I don't know that that's true either. So we're just not going to
No,
use
I
those
don't think
labels.
so. No.
So if this resonated with you, please like our episode, subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you in future chats on the Grief Gurus.
Bye bye.